are only old men going into battle. While Britain is about to give Ukraine shells with depleted uranium cores, Russia has begun pulling T-55 tanks out of mothballs. Photos and then a video of a train carrying Russian military equipment from the Russian Far East appeared online. It was identified as Soviet T-54 and T-55 medium tanks. This train recently departed from the 1295th Central Tank Reserve and Storage Base. Facts of the dispatch and use of T-62 tanks by the Russian armed forces in the current invasion have been recorded since the summer, but the removal of T-54s from storage is recorded for the first time. For such purposes the shells from the British partners are too excessive. From a reasonable distance, the uranium core will pierce two such through and through. A bit of history: the first modifications of these tanks were adopted in the second half of the 1940s, and the T-55, in 1958. The key disadvantages of these models were the lack of rangefinders and ballistic calculators, the primitive sights, and the T-54 also had incomplete gun stabilization. Along with decommissioning the BTR-50 and installing ship-based anti-aircraft guns on the MTLB amphibious vehicle, this clearly demonstrates the severe problems in supplying the Russian armed forces with armored vehicles. A 12-pound cannon from the time of Napoleon's Great Army is a dangerous weapon. If the core of such a cannon hits the building where you are, you will be in trouble. You will be hit by shrapnel and crumbs, and if a dozen of these cannons open fire, then you will be covered with debris. In the open field it is not a holiday for the enemy either. And also at that time there were mines and bombs. One of them would come from a cannon or howitzer and send the enemy to the afterlife. This is not a tiny grenade from a drone. In general, a 12-pound cannon is a formidable weapon that is 250 years old, and it's funny to make fun of it. It shoots and destroys. What more do you need? That's it. Any cannon is better than no cannon at all. Isn't that right? No, it's not, and that's why no one is going to use 12-pounders today. Even if no other guns are available. When we're talking about the removal from storage by the Russians of the T-54 or other prehistoric Soviet scrap metal, it's not a question of whether it shoots or not, whether it's dangerous or not. Roman catapults also shoot, and are also dangerous if they come at you, but it's about trends. Are we talking about positive progression or degradation? What is the overall level of organization of their armed forces and their military capabilities? And what we're seeing so far is a striving degradation of the enemy, a degradation that's gaining more and more momentum. Of course we should not laugh at this, but we also should not react to pro-Russian publications that it shoots like the Soviet soldiers shot at Hitler's army during World War II. Always when you see such phenomena, look not specifically at the type of weaponry, but at the general trend, whether their army is strengthening or vice versa. That's what's important. And meanwhile the enemy does not get tired of amazement. At such a rate they will soon put the cavalry in the army, and propaganda channels will assure that the cavalry is unjustly forgotten. That it famously defeated the enemy in the 17th century, that the traditions of the Russian army are directly connected with horses, and so on. Realistically, one should expect cavalry. Wheelbarrows, Maxim machine guns have already been seen at the front, by the way. I suppose generations of enemy weapons should already be measured like centuries BC, in reverse order. These are the ones in the picture, minus the third generation. Ukrainian cities are zeroing in on Russian commanders. Soledar zeroed out the leader of the Wagner group, and now we see Uglida zeroing out Colonel General Muradov, who previously served as the commander of the Russian peacekeeping contingent in Karabakh. In a nutshell, the Russian general who was in charge of the meat storms of Uglida was dismissed. So to speak, the meat assaults have ground up another Russian general. But this is a situational moment to which we have long been accustomed, a meaningless turnover of meaningless personnel. Who knows, maybe now they will bring him back to the Karabakh region again, especially now, when there is a catalyzing and where a loser is badly needed, on whom another fiasco will be pinned. And yet back to Uglida. The Russian command has not abandoned plans to capture this town, and it is vital to them. On the other hand, their lack of resources had forced them to reduce the intensity of the assault since mid-February and go into a state of restoration of combat effectiveness. Restoring the combat effectiveness of the group that stormed Uglida could take anywhere from a month and a half to 2 months. And this is important. After all, taking into account the decrease in the intensity of storming actions in the Uglida direction by the occupants from the middle of February, the recovery process has already been underway for a month and a half. In other words, the middle or end of April could be the next stage in the activation of Russian troops in the Uglida direction. By then the Vostok group of troops will have a new commander, who will also demonstrate to Putin a high level of efficiency, but already on T-62M. For the defenders of Uglida, this is not a particularly bright prospect, but in general, what does it say? It suggests that the pressure on the Bakhmut and Avdiivka directions may significantly decrease, as the new face will try to serve himself to the supreme commander by capturing Uglida. Many are concerned about the question, will it work? The answer is unequivocally no. This is due to a number of objective factors, but the main thing is that the limited resources available to the Russian troops will be directed to where it will be ground into fine minced meat, and that will only strengthen the Ukrainian position in other locations and directions. Before I continue, I ask you to subscribe to my channel, this will help promote it. Throughout 2022 and now 2023 I was asked in the comments about Russia's use of tactical nuclear weapons, to which I always replied, no, it won't. And there are several reasons for this, among which is not only the complexity of the process of implementing such an order. An important reason for not using them, is that such warheads became ineffective as early as the late 1970s, given the combat tactics of the time. That is, the use of tactical nuclear weapons had no serious impact on the combat zone 50 years ago. And on top of everything else, it will maximally untie the hands of Ukraine, which was the third largest nuclear state in the world after the US and Russia.